Okay, so Lars, I
Hello.
think you all know Lars, as I said. This is Lars Laird Iversen, and he's an associate professor of sociology here at MF. And he's here because he has written a new book, which we all can see here. Yes. It's called Lykkeforskning and sosiologs oppdagelsesreise. And so what Lars will do today is that he will present the book, and he will also, if he has the time for it, say something about the response to the respondents from the release event that was a couple of weeks ago. So as I always do, I have to explain the drill if there's someone here who hasn't been here before. 13 minutes presentation, 13 minutes Q&A. Please use the chat function if you're with us online, and then if you're here, use the mic. We'll try to pass it around, or you can just walk up here to the table. Please, Lars.
Right.
Your turn.
Thank you very much, and lovely to see you all here. So what I'm planning to do now is just to talk you through the setup of the book and the idea behind it. And hopefully, as I do that, some of sort of responses to some obvious criticisms might be made clear along the way. Now, so the book is called Happiness Research, a Sociologist's Exploration. And I've been interested in happiness research for, I don't know, 15 years, since I turned up in an airport shop, and I was a bit embarrassed because I was a young and insecure early academic. And I thought, can I read this? But it was an airport, nobody could see me. So I picked it up. And it was an excellent book. It's called by a British economist called Lars Laird. There was basically a social science approach to happiness. And I read more, and I got interested in it. And a few years ago, I had the chance to sit down and write it all out and try to make it part of my work, not only part of my free time. And the result is this book, which is basically me having read quite a lot of happiness research and then trying to use my own sociologist background or critical social science background to think more in depth about what social scientists and people more generally in school and wherever can learn from happiness research, but also what happiness research can learn from a critical social science perspectives. So that's the kind of the meeting point here. All right. My plan is basically to set up through the book. So the introduction of the book sort of explains this and says a bit about where I come from and what I do. And then I also try to give a definition and talk a bit about the relationship that I think is a useful way to think about the relationship between happiness and meaning. Now, defining happiness, well, it's very hard. So the way that I've thought about it is to look at what the quantitative researchers do. And what they do, after having, as far as I've understood, tried out a lot of methods. They have measured people's skin tension levels. They have interviewed their friends. They have done all kinds of in-depth sort of investigations. And many come back to the same kind of gold standard, which is to ask people, how happy or would you say that you are with your life from a scale from 1 to 10? And it seems to measure something, right? It seems to measure something interesting and useful, and it seems to correlate quite a lot with all the other measures, which are far more complicated and expensive to get hold of. And then you could ask, what are people actually answering when they're answering that question? And it seems to me that, well, it seems to the researchers, that what actually is going on is a quick computation in our minds, where we think quickly about, what am I feeling? How is my emotional state? Have I got many positive emotions? Have I got many negative emotions? They can be both high and both low at the same time. It doesn't need to be like that. And then secondly, we make a more sort of cognitive assessments. What do I think about my life? Am I, does it feel good? Am I sort of in my more cognitive mood? Do I assess my life? And then we make some kind of balance of that, and the answer, we are able, reasonably sensible, put a number to it. All right. So in that sense, happiness is our emotional tone, the balance between positive and negative emotions, and the assessment of our lives, and that's our happiness score. Now, happiness, it suffers a bit of it actually being a scale that's named after its end point. Because actually, this is the study of human, well, I don't know, more or less happiness, more or less well-being. And the word happiness seems to sort of, I don't know, it's even worse in Norwegian, lykke. That sounds like sort of constant ecstasy, but it's not that. It's how we're doing. Another thing I thought was interesting was meaning. Now, meaning and happiness are absolutely interlinked, and doing meaningful things and finding meaning in life is an important part of how to be happy. However, I don't think it's a definitional link. The way I see it is that it's perfectly possible to be well, if somebody does something that's very meaningless, if you hang out in yachts and you're just looking around for your next sort of hedonistic shot of something nice, if you're able to do that and vary it all the time, you're probably actually going to be pretty happy. But it's hard, and you'll constantly need to find new stimulus, and it's easier and more sustainable to find something that's meaningful in your life. Also, it's possible to be evil and happy, I would think. However, I think that's also hard. We wired, and we want community, and we want to do good things to people. So, yeah, but it's not part of the definition. Some philosophers would like the good and the meaningful to be part of the definition of happiness, but I would say that they are tools to make happiness more sustainable and robust, maybe. Anyway, now the second chapter of the book is the most academic one, where I'm reading happiness research. I get into quite a lot of biology, and the default reaction to biology from quite a few critical social scientists is to shun it and to say that it's scary. And because, of course, of a history of racist and sexist ideologies masquerading as biological science. However, that doesn't mean that this is true, that biology does lead us into sexist and racist and other kind of exclusionary stories. So for me, it was a big part of, I don't know, the journey I had to make was to find a better way of incorporating my sociological approaches with a more flexible and a less politicized understanding of human biology. All right. The way I tried to do that, just very quickly, is I introduced something I call the multi-speed model. The world is made of a whole bunch of stuff that change at different speeds. If I write something in the sand, that is something that's meaningful and it's got some material presence, but that will change pretty quickly. If I have an idea about a house, if I write it on a piece of paper, that has, it's not that solid, but if I build it, then I've expended effort and it has a material presence that is slower to change, right? So I set up a distinction between solid and fluid, where I don't know if it's inside or outside the human body isn't that important. Some parts of our body store things solidly and are slow changing. Some things in our bodies are stored more fluidly and are easier and quicker to change. And the same is true of things outside ourselves. So I operate with solid and fluid, and I operate with things being upstream and downstream in a social system. So in MF, the social system, then Vidar, rector, is upstream for most of us. The avdelingsrådsleder would be about midstream, and us working at the grassroots would be sort of downstream. And I think social systems should be usefully talked about in a way that crosses between biology and social science by thinking of things as upstream, downstream, a fluid and solid. And that's kind of the toolkit that I try to enter into some of these discussions about. Right. So what does make us happy? Well, what the book basically does is, through 5 chapters, I've picked out 5 areas which, according to my reading, happiness research has turned out is pretty clear that brings us happiness. But then I bring in social science kind of critiques and critical angles for each of them, and I discuss them. And that's basically the setup for the main part of the book. So I talk about togetherness, right? Our relationships and our community. If there's one thing that I think seems to be important for happiness, it is the quality of our relationships to other people. All right. Then I discuss how in-groups seem to be dependent on out-group constructions as well, and discussions of how to be able to maintain some kinds of community in-group feeling whilst trying not to make the exclusionary mechanisms hateful and harsh and dangerous. But the inside demands an outside, I think, is one of the insights I'm getting from this. Now, movement. Moving our body is a good thing. It makes us happy. However, movement and exercise is woven into ways of talking and ways of doing, and I don't know, the word discourses might turn up, of things like competition and things like body image, beauty ideas in our societies. And I try to discuss how this gets in the way of something good. Our bodies that are meant to move is messed up by the important ways of talking about it. I do the same about nature. We seem to be biophilic, that we do want to be in nature, that being in calm and nice nature, not being attacked by snakes, but is good for us. It makes us heal quick when we're ill. It makes us feel more relaxed. It opens our presence to things in a good way. However, nature is also enmeshed in exclusionary ways of thinking and doing about it. I'm talking about ideas of Norwegianness and nationalism connected to distinct ways of being in nature. I talk about mindfulness and about how something that seems to be well established to be helpful can also be enmeshed in ways of talking about mindfulness that is corporatized and that puts, for instance, basically, you have a hardworking situation and your boss or your newspaper articles say, well, go meditate, you know, that will make you, oh dear, I spent 13 minutes, meditate. And the last one, so mindfulness versus Mac mindfulness, the corporatized, individualizing versions of mindfulness. And finally, I talk about rituals, how rituals seem to give us rhythms and practices and train us to establish good habits in our lives. Yeah, so I think the underlying theme in the book is what happens when good things can also exclude. It's a pretty accessible book written for academic and non-academic audiences, and I enjoyed writing it. Yeah, there we are.